Now, to make this natural fermented grape juice wine, I'll be using the following. I've got 1 gallon of 100% grape juice with no preservatives. I have 1 pound of table grapes. In this particular case, I'm using organic grapes. Gives me a better chance of having a lot more active yeast on the skins of the grapes. I'll be using 2 cups of sugar, just plain granulated table sugar. I'll be using the juice of 1/4 of a lemon, which is going to act as our acid blend substitute. I need 1 black tea bag, which is going to act as our tannin substitute, which is going to provide a little bit of astringency to our wine at the back end. It would be helpful, although not essential, if you have some straining bags. We're going to need a fermenter that has a wide mouth opening so that we can get our straining bags into. Something that's got something nice and big like that. Now, if you don't have a nice fancy looking fermenter like this, you can always use a standard bucket like this. We're going to need a secondary fermenter, carboy, jug, demijohn, take your pick, because after about a week or so of primary fermentation, we're going to move everything over into our secondary container to continue on with secondary fermentation. We're going to need an airlock with bung for our secondary fermenter and also one for a primary fermenter. Although not required, it would be nice to have a hydrometer with testing tube to determine our starting gravity, which is the amount of sugar that's in our juice at the start, so that we can compare that with the amount of sugar remaining at the end of fermentation, so that we can then determine how much alcohol is present in the wine. And of course, last but certainly not least, we want to make sure that all of our equipment has been properly cleaned and sanitized. In this case, I'll be using Starsan to do the sanitization, and it will be in a spray bottle for the most part. And if you are using spray bottles, you might want to label your spray bottles so that you don't confuse it, or anyone else, confusing it with something else that might, do them harm. And that's what I'm going to be using to make this wine. Now, since we really don't know what's done what on these grapes while they were growing on the vine, let's just go ahead and give them a quick rinse. Don't need to scrub them, because that's where our natural yeast is coming from. But we will at least try and make an attempt to get these grapes a bit cleaner than what they were. Now, in a small pot, let's go ahead and pour in roughly 1/4 of a cup. No need to be precise. Of our grape juice in. And let's drop our tea bag in. And let's bring this up to a simmer. And now that our tannin substitute mixture has come to a simmer, we can go ahead and turn off the stove. Put a lid on. And let this come down to room temperature. All right, let's go ahead and get our grapes off the vine. And we want to make sure that we get good grapes here. Anything that doesn't look like something you would want to put in your mouth, those are the ones we don't want to put in our wine. All right. Now, the next thing I want to do is that I want to give these grapes, get back here. Is I want to give these grapes a rough chop and then get them into our straining bags. Now, if you happen to have one of these, that would make life a whole lot easier. But that's going to be the process. Give them a rough chop, get them in the bags. All right, with our grapes now in the bag, let's go ahead and tie these off. Yeah, set that aside. Now, since we're making 1 gallon, or in my case, I'm actually going to make 4 liters, what I need to do in order to make room for the sugar is to pour off 2 cups of juice or thereabouts. If you've got a funnel, go ahead and use it. And go ahead and pour that in one of our containers of juice. All right. Go ahead and put our cap back on, nice and tight. And let's go ahead and dissolve all that sugar. Okay. Let's get ready for the next step. Let's get our quarter of a lemon wedge ready. Now, if you have a strainer, go ahead and make use of that. Try not to get any seeds in there, if it can be helped. And just go ahead and give it a good squeeze. You don't need to get every last of a drop. And while we're at it, now would be a good time to go ahead and add in our straining bags. And there was quite a bit of grape juice left, so we'll go ahead and pour that in. And put our lid back on. All right, I'm going to give this one last little stir. Put the lid back on. And then I am going to take a hydrometer reading. All right, looks like that initial hydrometer reading is coming in at 1.102. Now, this particular fermenter does come with its own built-in airlock. However, I'm going to swap that out and use a standard airlock that it also comes with, just so I can determine when fermentation has actually begun. I've inserted an airlock into its little mini bong that comes with the fermenter and put that in the hole where the built-in airlock used to be. I filled up the fermenter up to its levels with a little bit of diluted star sand and water. And with that being done, ready for the next step. All right, it's now time to label our creation with a few descriptions. We are making, go ahead and get it on there, right? We are making a natural ferment grape. We started it on this date, and our original gravity reading started out at 1.102. Now, 3 days later, it was a slow ferment to begin, but basically it has now begun to actively ferment. We've got a pretty good layer of CO2-based foam sitting in our fermenter, and our airlock has begun bubbling away at a pretty decent pace, letting us know that CO2 gas is being released and going through the airlock and out. Now, the next thing I want to do is I want to go ahead and remove our straining bag, because the whole purpose of those table grapes was to make use of the yeast that was on the skins of the grapes. And since we no longer need it, we can go ahead and remove it. Let it drain a little bit. and put our cap back on. And what we want to do now for the next, 2 or 3 days is to go ahead and let fermentation continue in this fermenter, at least until some of the foam has begun to dissipate. It's no longer fermenting as actively as it is now. Because what we have now is we've got a lot of CO2 in this space in our fermenter that we want to make sure that later on this CO2 layered is not replaced by oxygen, which would then start to degrade our wine, which is one of the reasons why we put it in our secondary carboy. Now, the thing about transferring it into our secondary carboy is that we can bring the level up all the way up to nearly the top. And then all we have to do is be less concerned about the small amount of oxygen that may develop in our carboy later on. Initially, it's just going to be CO2 protecting our wine. But that's what we intend to do. Remove this cap, put our airlock on after we've filled up our carboy, and put it aside for the next several months to let secondary fermentation go ahead and do its thing. Now, over the course of the year that I usually like to let my wines mature, there'll be several processes that will occur. I have standalone videos in my winemaking operations playlist on my channel page. Those being, there may be 1 or 2 more additional rackings. Later on, there'll be some degassing, back sweetening, bottling, pasteurization, corking, labeling, and finally tasting. So, next time you see me will be 12 months hence in our tasting video, which will follow after this video. But for the moment, we're going to go ahead and put this fermenter back into a nice, cool, dark place and let it do its thing. And in 12 months' time, we'll be doing the tasting video. So again, if you like what you see here, please click on that like and subscribe button, notify button, become a member, become a Patreon, help support this channel out. So I'll see you in 12 months.